You know, they tell you that money changes everything, that it buys you freedom and peace of mind. But let me tell you, when you're gripping the steering wheel of a $100,000 car, while your chest feels like an elephant is sitting on it, you realize pretty quick that a bank account doesn't have a heartbeat. My name is Elijah Vance, and 6 weeks ago, I was a tech mogul in Chicago, the kind of guy who measured his worth in stock options and headlines, until my heart literally decided to go on strike right in the middle of a board meeting. The doctors called it a massive cardiac event, but I called it a wake-up call from the Reaper himself, telling me to sit down before I got put down permanently. So, under strict orders to do absolutely nothing, no emails, no calls, no stress, I drove south to the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee to a secluded cabin I'd bought 5 years ago and visited exactly once, looking for silence, looking for solitude, looking for a way to keep my heart ticking for a few more years. But life, as I found out the hard way, has a really twisted sense of humor, because when I pulled up to that long, winding gravel driveway, expecting to see weeds and cobwebs, I saw petunias, bright purple petunias spilling out of flower boxes I definitely didn't install, and the front porch, which should have been covered in mountain dust, was swept clean, gleaming under the afternoon sun. I sat in the car for a minute, popping a beta blocker, trying to keep my blood pressure from spiking like the doctor warned me about, thinking maybe I'd taken a wrong turn. But no, that was my custom mahogany door, except now it was wide open, and the sound drifting out wasn't the silence I craved, it was laughter. Children's laughter. I grabbed my cane, yeah, I needed a cane at 42. That's what stress does to you, and I walked up those steps with a mix of confusion and that old, familiar rage starting to bubble up in my gut. I stepped across the threshold ready to scream, ready to threaten legal action, but the words died in my throat because the scene in front of me was so domestic. There was a little girl, maybe 4 years old, spinning in circles on the rug with a stuffed rabbit, a boy about 8 reading a book on the window seat, and a woman who looked like she carried the weight of the world in the slope of her shoulders, folding laundry on my leather sofa. When she saw me, she didn't run, she didn't attack. She just dropped a t-shirt and went pale, her eyes wide with a terror that looked way too familiar with bad news. "Who are you?" I managed to rasp out, my voice rusty from disuse. She stepped in front of the kids instinctively, shielding them. I can explain, sir, please, we didn't think anyone was coming back. Her name was Maya. She wasn't a burglar. She wasn't a junkie. She was a mother who had hit rock bottom so hard it cracked the pavement. She told me, her voice shaking but her chin held high, that her husband had died in a factory accident a year ago, that the insurance never paid out, that the medical bills ate their savings, and the landlord finally put them on the street 3 months ago. She'd found my cabin abandoned, unlocked the back door which had a broken latch I'd neglected to fix, and she'd been living there, keeping it spotless, planting a garden, just trying to keep her kids warm until she could figure out a next move. Now, the old Elijah, the Chicago CEO Elijah, would have called the sheriff immediately. That Elijah would have seen liability, property rights, trespassing. But the Elijah standing there, leaning on a cane, feeling his heart flutter dangerously, looked at the little girl peeking out from behind her mom's legs, asking, "Mama, is that the bad man? Do we have to sleep in the car again?" And something in me just broke. Or maybe it fixed itself. I don't know. "You have 10 days, I grunted, rubbing my temple. "I'm here on medical leave. I need quiet. You stay out of my way, you keep the kids quiet, and in 10 days, you find somewhere else. But I'm taking the master bedroom." Maya looked at me like I just handed her a winning lottery ticket. She cried, thanked me a dozen times, and ushered the kids into the back room. And that was how my solitude began, not with silence, but with an accidental family living in the margins of my life. For the first few days, we danced around each other like ghosts. I'd wake up late, exhausted from doing nothing, and come out to the kitchen to find fresh coffee already brewed, exactly the way I liked it, dark roast, no sugar. I'd find a plate of eggs and toast sitting under a warmer. Maya moved through the house like a shadow, cleaning, cooking, keeping the kids hushed. But you can't silence life, not really. I'd hear the boy, Leo, reading aloud to his sister, Zoe, doing funny voices for the characters. I'd smell lavender and fresh bread instead of the stale, dusty air of an empty house. And despite myself, despite the fact that I was supposed to be annoyed, I found myself sitting on the porch in the evenings, listening to Maya sing lullabies through the thin walls, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over me that no amount of medication had ever achieved. But trouble, as it always does, came knocking in a $3,000 suit. It was day 5. I was sitting on the porch, actually watching Leo teach Zoe how to catch fireflies, feeling a smile tug at the corner of my mouth, when a silver Porsche SUV tore up my gravel driveway, kicking up dust and arrogance in equal measure. My stomach dropped. I knew that car. It belonged to Sterling Thorne, my business partner, the man who had been circling my position like a vulture ever since I went down in that boardroom. Sterling stepped out, looking at the mountain air like it smelled like manure, and spotted me. "Elijah, my God, man, you look rustic. We've been trying to reach you. The merger is on the table, and the board is getting twitchy." I stood up, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest, not from the heart condition, but from the stress this man radiated. "I told you, Sterling, I'm on leave. No shop talk. Leave is for people who want to come back, Elijah." He sneered, walking up the steps. "We need a signature. We need you to cash out. You're not fit to lead anymore. Look at you. You're playing hillbilly while the stock dips." Just then, Maya walked out onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron, looking confused. "Elijah, is everything okay?" "I have lunch, Reed." Sterling stopped, looking her up and down with a sneer that made me want to punch his perfect veneers out. Well, I see why you're resting. Didn't know you hired help. Or is this entertainment?" The air went cold. Maya shrank back, shame coloring her cheeks, but before she could retreat, I stepped between them. "I didn't think about it. I just moved. Watch your mouth, Sterling," I growled, my voice low and dangerous. "This is Maya. She's a guest, and she has more class in her pinky finger than you have in your entire portfolio." Sterling laughed, a dry, humorless bark. "Oh, please. She's a squatter, Elijah. I can smell the desperation from here. You're losing your mind. You're letting strays live in your investment property. You really are unfit. Get off my property," I said, pointing the cane at him like a weapon. "Now, you're making a mistake," Sterling hissed, backing down but eyes blazing. "I'm taking the offer to the board. We'll force you out, and when you come crawling back to Chicago broke, don't ask me for a favor." He peeled out of the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust and silence. I turned to look at Maya, expecting her to be angry or embarrassed, but she was looking at me with something else, something soft, something that terrified me more than the heart attack. "You defended me," she whispered. "He's a jerk," I muttered, sitting back down heavily, my heart racing but feeling strangely good. "Nobody talks to you like that in my house." My house. It felt different when I said it this time. It didn't feel like an asset. It felt like a home. That night, things shifted. The barrier between us broke down. We ate dinner together for the first time. Maya made a pot roast that tasted like heaven, and I actually engaged with the kids. I showed Leo a few magic tricks with a coin, and Zoe fell asleep on my lap while we watched a movie. I looked over at Maya, who was watching us with a gentle, sad smile, and I realized I was in deep trouble. I wasn't just tolerating them. I was needing them. I was waking up excited to hear the noise. I was dreading the 10-day deadline more than I was dreading my next doctor's appointment. But the universe wasn't done testing us. 2 days later, I woke up to a crash. I found Maya on the kitchen floor, gripping her ankle, face white as a sheet. She'd slipped on a puddle of water near the sink. "It's broken," she gasped, tears leaking from her eyes. I can't walk." "Don't move," I ordered, instinct taking over. I scooped her up carefully, mindful of my own ticker, and carried her to the sofa. It was a bad sprain, not a break, but she was out of commission. "I can't stay off my feet." She panicked, trying to get up. "I have to cook. I have to pack. We only have 3 days left, Elijah. I have to find a place." "Stop," I said, pushing her gently back down. "I've got it, you." She looked at me like I'd just offered to fly to the moon. "Elijah, you're recovering. You can't handle the kids in a house. Watch me, I said, and let me tell you, running a Fortune 500 company, easy compared to managing a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old for 48 hours. I burned the toast. I put Zoe's shoes on the wrong feet. I accidentally let the bathtub overflow. But I also laughed more in those 2 days than I had in 20 years. I became Uncle Eli. I sat with Maya in the evenings, icing her ankle, talking not about stocks or mergers, but about life. She told me about her late husband, about how hard it was to be strong all the time. I told her about the emptiness of my penthouse, about the fear of dying alone in a room full of expensive furniture. We were bonding over the wreckage of our lives, building something new without even realizing it. But fear is a powerful thing, and Maya had a lot of it. On the morning of the 9th day, I woke up to silence, absolute, heavy silence. I walked out to the living room and saw suitcases packed by the door. Maya was sitting there, her ankle wrapped, looking determined. What are you doing? I asked, feeling a cold pit open in my stomach. We're leaving, she said, not meeting my eyes. My ankle is good enough. I found a shelter to towns over that has space. We can't stay here, Elijah. Why? I demanded. We're doing fine. I haven't asked you to leave, because it's not real. She snapped and finally looked at me, eyes brimming with tears. This playing house, it's a fantasy, Elijah. You're a millionaire from Chicago. I'm a widow with nothing. Eventually, you'll get bored or you'll get better and go back to your life. And my kids will be the ones who get their hearts broken when Uncle Eli disappears. I can't let that happen. I have to protect them. She was right, logically. But emotionally, it felt like she was ripping my chest open. I'm not going anywhere, I argued, stepping closer. Maya, I don't want to go back. You say that now. She shook her head, grabbing her crutches. But you will. Everyone leaves, Elijah. It's better if we go before it hurts too much. She called a cab. It was raining hard outside, a storm rolling in over the Smokies, turning the sky a bruised purple. I watched them load the car, feeling helpless, feeling like a coward for not saying what I really wanted to say. I let them go. I stood on the porch and watched the taillights fade into the mist, and the house suddenly felt massive, cold, and dead. I walked back inside and saw a piece of paper on the table. It was a drawing Zoe had made. It was a stick figure of me, holding hands with her and Leo and Maya. Underneath, in messy crayon, it said family. I stared at it, and then I grabbed my keys. To hell with the doctor's orders. To hell with being sensible. I was going after them. The rain wasn't just falling. It was coming down in sheets, turning the dirt roads of the Smoky Mountains into slick rivers of mud. I was in my car, gripping the wheel, my heart pounding a rhythm that felt dangerous. But I didn't care. I was chasing the beat-up sedan taxi that held the only thing that had made sense in my life. For the last 10 years, I drove fast, taking the hairpin turns with a recklessness that would have given my cardiologist a stroke. But about 3 miles down the mountain, I saw brake lights. Red, glaring, and stationary, the taxi was stopped. There was a massive oak tree down across the road, brought down by the storm, completely blocking the path. The driver was outside, yelling into his phone, waving his arms. I pulled up, jumped out into the deluge, and ran to the back window of the cab. Maya was inside, looking terrified, clutching Zoe, who was flushed red, looking sweaty and limp. Elijah, Maya gasped when I opened the door, the rain soaking us both instantly. The road is blocked. We're stuck. Zoe, I said, looking at the little girl. What's wrong with her? She was coughing earlier, but she's burning up now, Maya cried, pressing her hand to the child's forehead. It happened so fast. She's struggling to breathe. I leaned in. Zoe's breathing was shallow, raspy, that terrifying wheezing sound that every parent knows means trouble. It wasn't just a cold. It was serious. Maybe pneumonia, maybe an allergic reaction. I didn't know. But I knew we couldn't wait for a tow truck to clear the tree. Get in my car. I shouted over the wind. We're going back to the cabin. I have oxygen. I have a med kit. We need a hospital. Maya screamed. We can't get down the mountain. I yelled back. The tree blocked the only way out. The ambulance can't get to us. We have to stabilize her at the house until the storm breaks." Maya hesitated for a split second, then nodded. We grabbed the kids. I carried Zoe, who felt terrifyingly hot against my chest, and Maya hobbled on her bad ankle with Leo. We piled into my SUV and reversed all the way back up that treacherous driveway. The next 6 hours were the longest of my life. Inside the cabin, the power flickered and died, leaving us in the gray gloom of the storm. I fired up the generator, got the lights back on, and we turned the living room into a makeshift infirmary. I dug out the emergency oxygen tank I kept for my own condition and rigged the mask for Zoe. Maya was stripping her down, using cool cloths to try and bring the fever down, sobbing quietly while trying to be strong for her daughter. "She's so hot." "Elijah," Maya whispered, her voice cracking. "She's burning up. If I lose her, I can't lose her too." "I can't, you won't," I said, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "I promise you, Maya, I won't let that happen." I sat there, holding the little girl's hand, monitoring her pulse, forcing fluids into her every time she woke up whimpering. I looked at Maya, sitting on the other side of the bed, her hair wet, her eyes dark with exhaustion and fear, and I realized this was it. This was the test. Not the boardroom battles, not the stock market crashes. This, fighting for a life that wasn't mine by blood, but was mine by choice. Round 3 a.m. The storm raged outside, shaking the cabin walls. But inside, a miracle happened. Zoe took a deep breath, a clear one, and her eyes fluttered open. The fever broke. The sweat on her forehead turned cool. She looked up at me, blinked groggily, and whispered, "Uncle Eli, did the storm go away?" I let out a breath that felt like a sob. "Yeah, baby. The storm is breaking. You're okay." Maya collapsed across the bed, burying her face in the mattress, weeping with relief. I reached out and put my hand on her back, rubbing slow circles, letting her cry it out. Leo, who had been watching from the doorway with wide, scared eyes, ran in and hugged his mom, and I just sat there, feeling more exhausted and more alive than I had ever felt. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the destruction outside. Branches down, mud everywhere but inside. It was peaceful. Zoe was sleeping soundly. Maya and I sat on the porch steps, drinking coffee made on the gas stove, watching the steam rise off the wet grass. We were both disheveled, running on adrenaline fumes, but the wall between us was gone. "You saved her," Maya said softly, looking at the coffee mug in her hands. "You didn't have to come after us. You could have let us go." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I couldn't." "Why?" She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. "Why do you care so much, Elijah?" "We're just a complication." "Because I tried the other way," I said, looking out at the mountains. "I tried the life where I only cared about myself, where I built walls of money and success to keep people out. And you know where it got me? It got me a heart attack at 42 and an empty hospital room. When I thought Zoe was in trouble last night, I wasn't worried about my liability. I was terrified of losing my family." I turned to her and took her hand. It was rough, callous from work, and it fit perfectly in mine. "I'm done with Chicago, Maya. I'm done with Sterling and the board and the empty penthouse. I want to stay here, but I don't want to stay here alone. This house, it was a tomb until you walked into it. You brought the life. You brought the noise. I choose this. I choose you. I choose the chaos and the burnt toast and the sprained ankles. If you'll have me." Maya stared at me, tears welling up again. "You're serious? You'd give it all up for us?" "I'm not giving anything up," I smiled. "I'm trading up. I'm getting the better deal." She laughed, a watery, beautiful sound, and leaned in. We kissed right there on the muddy porch steps, tasting of coffee and second chances. 2 days later, the roads were cleared. A black town car pulled up the driveway. It was Sterling again, looking even more impatient. He had legal papers in his hand. I walked out to meet him, but this time, I wasn't leaning on my cane. I was standing straight. "Elijah," Sterling barked. "Enough is enough. The board is voting tomorrow. You sign the buyout, or we bury you. What's it going to be?" I took the papers from him. I didn't even read them. I pulled a pen from my pocket and signed on the dotted line. Sterling blinked, stunned. You're signing? Just like that? You're walking away from $100 million empire? Keep the empire, Sterling, I said, handing the papers back. I've got other investments to manage. I looked back at the house. Leo was chasing the dog we'd just adopted. Zoe was helping Maya plant new flowers in the window box. Maya looked up and waved, a radiant smile on her face. You're a fool, Sterling muttered, shaking his head as he got back in his car. You'll regret this in a month. I don't think so, I said. Drive safe, Sterling. I watched him leave, watched the dust settle, and felt light. The pressure in my chest was gone. 6 months later, we got married in that backyard. It wasn't a fancy affair. Old man Silas, my neighbor, officiated. Leo was the ring bearer, and Zoe was the flower girl. I wore a simple suit, and Maya wore a white sundress that made her look like an angel. We didn't have a reception at the plaza. We had a barbecue with neighbors and friends we'd made in the town. And you know what? My heart hasn't skipped a beat since. My blood pressure is lower than it's been in 20 years. I started a small consulting firm from the home office, working 4 hours a day. Just enough to keep the lights on and the college funds growing. But the real work is teaching Leo how to fish, reading stories to Zoe, and loving Maya the way she deserves to be loved. I found out that the heart is a muscle, and like any muscle, it needs exercise. But the best exercise isn't cardio. It's compassion. It's opening up. It's letting people in even when it's scary, even when it's messy. I drove up that driveway looking for a place to recover, a place to hide from the world. Instead, I found the world right there in my living room. So, here's the thing I want you to take away from this. We spend so much time chasing the good life, the career, the status, the security. We build fortresses to protect ourselves. But sometimes, the best thing that can happen to you is for someone to break into your fortress, rearrange your furniture, and remind you that a house isn't a home until it has a heartbeat. Have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between your ambition and your happiness? Have you ever found love in a place you never expected? Tell me your story in the comments. I read them all. And if you enjoyed this story, if it made you feel something, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us tell more stories like this. I'm Elijah Vance, and I'm gonna go help my wife bake cookies. Thanks for listening.